Let me show you how we've taken that forward over time, because it was invented 40 odd years ago, that this line, have a break, have a Kit Kat, and that personality has evolved over those last 40 years. But over the time, we've added some more products to its profile. The old four-finger was where it started. But as we've changed the profile, we started to engage a different target audience, moving it from female to male with the type of product. And that type of product, what I'm talking about, is Kit Kat Chunky. It's for blokes. Big E. And it needs to identify itself with that target audience that we're going after. I'll show you a commercial we did recently, which is about entertaining that audience. And we'll see where we go from there. Step one, what do you have and what can you do to enhance that personality a little bit? Did that commercial come up? It's up to next. So we put together a campaign where we set out to do TV and outdoor to entertain and engage people. The first parts of that step. Having done that, we knew we'd have to move to a different form of engagement because the audience we were talking to was moving. So we had a whole range of things that we set out to do for Kit Kat Chunky, and particularly Kit Kat Chunky 3, which is a 3-pip product with different tastes and textures. Primarily, the campaign was run out of the entertaining and engagement piece of the model that we use. And I'll show you a couple of commercials which did that, and we're really the setup for where we ultimately went with the digital part of it. So show the commercials. I need
New Kit Kat Chunky 3. 3 chunky pieces of caramel fudge, crunchy caramel and gooey caramel. Triple the fun in your break. Have a break. Have a Kit Kat.
Quite entertaining, quite evidently about a social break, about a bunch of blokes having fun together. Quite entertaining. The first step in that social engagement model. We then produced another one. I'll show you that.
Come on.
Oh! Get the vent, get the vent!
New Kit Kat Chunky 3. 3 chunky pieces of caramel fudge, crunchy caramel and gooey caramel. Triple the fun in your break. Have a break. Have a Kit Kat.
In that commercial, you'll notice we started referencing Facebook and other social media. And it was important that as we entertained people and engaged them, and young blokes responded well. We researched it quite heavily. Young guys responded well to it. It was a bit outrageous, a bit zany. It was part of the Kit Kat personality and part of its profile just to be entertaining and amusing. So we set about putting up a competition for people on YouTube to post their pieces of entertaining and humorous, engaging sort of videos and post them. And set out to reward them if they posted one, and had some judgment criteria to win a prize, which was to be part of a new TV commercial on which they would star. Let me show you the one which won it. It appeared on YouTube and got an immense number of likes. Sorry. This has come on aggressively. This commercial is now or later? You can leave it on anyway. You can see here the way in which we allowed that deeper engagement to happen with a whole seeding things, EDFs, and channeling. We got 82,000 channel views of this particular promotion, and I'll show you the commercial. It's not actually the commercial, it's the winner's entry video. this guy got his mate to shoot it. Shot it by his mate, but he did all of it himself. Quite amazing. The number of channel views was outstanding. The views on that of this particular, and the number of likes that they got was fantastic from that audience that we were after, who we want to engage with for consumption of Kit Kat Chunky 3. Entirely consistent with the notion of entertaining and engaging people to build that social identity of Kit Kat. Because that's all it will ever be. We're not going to do anything more than trying to do that. So that's how we would treat a particular brand with a particular existing personality and simply go out there to build around what you already have. It already existed. So if you don't know where you're coming from and what it is, or when you do know, it's a whole lot easier to do that type of stuff. But unless you've defined it in the first place, or you inherited something that you really want to build on, it becomes much more of a struggle. It's entirely different, however, for a corporation. A corporation as big as Nestle has particular issues that surround it, and it wanted to transition from being basically a food company, a food and beverage company, to be a trusted nutrition, health and wellness company. And that started back in 1997. If you asked in Australia what Nestle was, it was a chocolate company. So how do you transition that from a company that had a profile like that? I'm not talking about a social identity, I'm talking about a profile of being a chocolate company to a nutrition, health and wellness company. What are you dealing with here? We're changing profiles of the company with products and what we did in our advertising. So we needed to change some perception. We started doing that back in 2000. And after around about 2004, we realised we'd got to a point where we could get onto TV to entertain and engage people. And we did that using Liz Ellis, a well-known sports star, quite an engaging sort of person. And we produced many TV commercials around that and ran them from about 2004 to just on early in 2010, about 6 years. During that time, we changed the profile of Nestle from being a chocolate company to being well recognised as a nutrition, health and wellness. Greater degree of trust in our products, greater degree of perception of the health of our products. People knew we didn't only make chocolate, we made all of these other products that were around, had all these other brands of which they were familiar with. But all we were doing was changing perception and through the profile of the company. And we measured it over time. We had over time an extraordinarily turnaround in people's perception, particularly housewives, who was our primary target audience, of what we were as a company. The issue was, however, we didn't have a social identity. And we knew come 2010, we knew we had to have a different notion. And we did some research about who we were. Even though we had this great profile, we did some research and worked with our colleagues at Naked Communications to find out what we could be. And they came back and said, look, we're pretty grey. You know? Big, amorphous company, food and beverage company, trusted and all that stuff, but you're grey. There's no warmth or sociability in who you are. We knew we had to change and put a social identity and some meaning around what Nestle was, not just a profile. It had to have, we had a brand essence. All the brands have brand essences. We had a brand essence for Nestle, but an essence is one thing. Meaning, and meaning in people's lives is entirely another. And if you don't have meaning in my view, you'll never have that, and establish some meaning with people, you'll never have that social identity you're looking for. I go back to the analogy that I spoke about at the beginning about how people are in social situations. You engage people. If you don't have meaning in your dialogue, it doesn't evolve to something, then what identity do you have, whether to them or to the community? So clearly we had to do something which was quite different. We had also a lot of other things which we knew we could build. Back in 2000, we established a relationship with the Institute of Sport about getting kids to become more active. Uncle Toby's had a big, long association with swimming and teaching kids to swim. Milo has a well-established 15-year program with the Cricket Association. We'd established a dialogue with the Dietitians Association. 10 years ago, they wouldn't have a bar of us. But over time, when they saw what we were setting out to do, they started to realise we were adding meaning into society, and then they began to understand that we were moving into a different place, and they started to have a dialogue with us. We had no profile in kids in classrooms. Teachers didn't want to know about us. We used the Institute of Sport to open the doors to kids in the thing. Why? To teach them about nutrition. Unbranded, just to teach them about nutrition. It was a Nestle logo. That was about the only logo thing that was in it. No reference to products, nothing. Because teachers needed help in teaching nutrition. There was nothing in the curriculum. So we had a whole lot of things that were there. How could we harness those things to add meaning into people's, to what we wanted to have as a social identity? What we realised we had to do was to enhance what we had. We were good at entertaining through the Liz Ellis campaign. We were good at engaging. We knew that because the message was getting in through. What we had to find was a way in which we could enhance that and enable people to live their lives better. Again, I go back to the analogy, how you work your way through, and that became the model that we started to think about. At the same time, a few years ago, I, as head of the AANA, was dealing with the obesity issue. And I went to one of the TV stations and said, look, we don't want to be into weight loss. It's not what we're on about. We're actually on about being wellness and healthiness. Why couldn't we borrow the concept and work with you guys, with the TV station we're under attack as well, to do what they do in Bhutan, which is to think about gross national happiness. How could we promote growth? And that's how the Bhutanese measure their society, not by gross national product, but by gross national happiness. I touted it to the TV stations. All I wanted to do, Biggest Loser, weight loss programs. It wasn't what we were about. And look, we just can't engage here. They're still doing their weight loss programs. I think they're going to die very shortly, but that's a whole other issue. I had this thing sitting around, this gross national happiness. So as we started to talk with the naked guys about changing our profile, they came up with the notion, well, maybe we should own joy. Joy. What's joy? I mean, joy is really happiness. And what came back through the thought process and the dialogue with the naked guys, maybe we should own something different. We need to build this whole model, to build our social identity around it, but use our brands and all those sorts of things, draw them into what they are, work a long-term framework out to how we draw what these different brands stand for and put them into some sort of context which would help us build the profile of Nestle around the notion of healthiness and happiness. And that's what we set out to do. We set out to own and have meaningful people in their lives between the virtuous connection between health and happiness. So I had this in my head. In fact, I'd just been to a checkup. So I said, you're very healthy. The heart specialist said, you're very healthy. I said, yes. And as I left, he said, but are you happy? I said, why? He said, because it's the greatest drug of all. If you are happy, you're healthy. If you're healthy, you tend to be happier. It's well proven. Okay, this was all fortunate because it happened at the same time as this discussion was happening. So I said to the guys at Naked, I said, is this true? They're psychologists. I said, this is true. Is there any written papers about this stuff? Turns out there's a dossier about this thick on the connection between health and happiness. It's quite a virtuous connection. It's a positive psychology says basically that notion. It's if you get one thing, you get the other, and it builds itself virtuously to a better outcome. There's a reference here to one of those papers in that whole thing. So we knew we were onto something that would actually add meaning in people's lives. We didn't have a profile anymore. We actually had something which added meaning to the way in which people in society would improve their lot in life by being healthier and happier. So we had a good concept. But how do we take that forward into something which was usable in the social media? Became the conundrum. We found a way. We created a thing called the Happily Healthy Project. Developed a symbol to what it stood for, and wrote out what we're setting out to do, which is to positively change attitudes and behaviours of all Australians to live a healthier, happier life. Our vision is that all Australians and Kiwis, because it was an Oceania project, would own it. Not us as the corporation, but rather we provide the impetus, the enhancement of that relationship to allow them to then build it and have a dialogue with us about how we could help. We wrote a manifesto for it. I won't read it through, I'll just leave it up there. You can read it yourselves. I'm sure you're all capable of reading the English language. But the most important bit was the bit at the bottom, the happily healthy quotient. We got a doctor, a well-regarded dietetics doctor, and a couple of psychologists to write an algorithm, to write a whole set of questions. Then we wrote an algorithm which will allow us to put a score out there. So people could take the test and score how happily and healthily they were living their lives. Tested it out off our database that we have and whether people responded to it, and responded massively to it. Absolutely massively. So we're onto something. The algorithm worked. We set out then to make sure we could use it to help people enhance their lives by measuring where they were in the scale. Their family, themselves, their family, their neighbours, whatever else it would. Also, by the way, it gave us another thing we could do. We could actually go to the government, to activists and other people, and tell people where the pockets of healthiness were in the society, where problems were in society. And the database we were building would be useful to other people. So we're beginning to enhance people's lives. This is how it looked. This is the quotient. It's not this young girl's particular quotient. She's one of the girls in my group. We ran a small amount of TV. We also particularly, though, went to the database that we had. For the last 10 years, we've been building our own database, requalifying that database of people who are in, who we wanted to have a dialogue. It now sits at pretty close to 2 million identified records of people with a good depth of profile of their purchasing habits and other lifestyle information. So we went to a small segment of those people initially. Once we tested, went to a small segment of those, and we put a bit of PR out there, a bit of magazine, and a minimal amount of television. We didn't have any money to do it. The results were quite exceptional. 3 million page views, 266 visits, 86,000 tests completed. And I don't know if you can read this. Some 40,000 odd people added to our database, and that's continued. This is as of the end of February. If you look at the conversion rates now, I did a bit of quick maths. There's about a 4% transition from views to visits. There's a 30% from visits to tests, and a 42% conversion from tests to going onto the database. So people enable you of further engagement and further things you can do with it. That enablement piece. Frankly, I've been in marketing a very, very long time. I've never seen that sort of conversion rates anywhere, anytime on anything that I've ever been involved with, and we've done quite a lot of these direct campaigns. We then started to realise we had to move from enhancing relationships to do something perhaps a little bit bigger, to harness the things that we had to enable people to live it. It's all very well to enhance that relationship, but if you don't help them to do it, either through your products or your brands or your associations, you've stopped short of getting a much more robust interaction at a social level between you and the people you're trying to reach. So what do we do to enable that? Here's one of those things. Health knowledge. We're using virtual reality to be able to people to shoot Milo and to tell them what the health properties of Milo are when mixed with milk. We were under attack on the basis that Milo supposedly had too much sugar. Trouble is they didn't ever measure it when they put it in milk. So we used a government survey of health survey, got a PhD to reanalyse it and to demonstrate that kids that drank milk with Milo had a higher calcium uptake, any sort of flavoured milk, quite frankly, but with Milo, a higher calcium uptake than kids that did not. What's calcium about? Stronger bones for kids. So we were able to, from this particular application of the virtual phone, enable people to understand better how they can enhance the lives of their kids in more nutritious stuff. It also enables us to connect them to other things related to cricket and sport. We then looked at, we had these are some of the things we've done, we've got many more, but these are the more critical ones that we realised we could pull in together, again, to help people live their lives better, to enable their kids to go and play cricket, to enable them to not drown, basically, in pools with Uncle Toby's. We had a relationship around swimming. We had Lisa Curry-Kennedy doing it for years. We've now got a strong relationship with the Royal Lifesaving Society. Why? Because the greatest fear mothers have about their kids living in houses with a lot of pools in Australia is that they will drown. Getting young kids to swim, what do? We enable them to live their lives better and with less apprehension about doing something which is inherently healthy for them. And by the way, kids in water, usually pretty happy. It's just life. So how have we gone? Where do we go from there? I showed you before a slide of so many brands that we have. We're now building around this notion of happiness, how each one of those brands can have a meaningful relationship which will help to build the profile of Nestle back through our own systems and back through into the Healthy Happy project. Each one of them now has a defined, if you look at most of these words, they're words that largely have some purpose or meaning, or can have some purpose or meaning. Have we got it all sorted out? No. It's getting sorted out. Phase 2 now, we've done a lot of that stuff, is actually now, in this next 12, 18 months or so, to move much more into these digital platforms. We held back from too much engagement on it because we wanted to be sure we knew how to do it, and we had enough substantial stuff that would people who with different lifestyles and different approaches to life would be able to engage. We figured we needed to sort it out first before we went and made that jump, otherwise people would become disappointed. There's nothing worse than a social relationship which is disappointing. Why would you bother? Any more with us, any more with the person you engage with at a dinner party or an event like this? Why would you do it? The consequence is we've moved from not having any social identity to one we knew we had to have, and we had a definition of what it was going to be. So having one that absolutely did have it. We've done it through that model. The model that at the beginning of my talk today, was built upon the simple notion of how people react in society. This is a social identity model for corporations and brands. It's no different, frankly, in our view, than the social interaction that goes on between people in social situations. It's a very simple model. It's labelled, it's a bit of ego here, it's my model. It's the 4 E's model. I had to find a way to make it very simple for the brand management people to understand. And we launched it 2 years ago at a marketing conference we held every year, some 200 or 300 brand marketers coming in from across the simple 4 E's model. What do you do when you're wanting to build things? Not just have a profile, but move to being entertaining and engaging. And some brands only will ever do that, like KitKat. Some brands can have all of those pieces built around it. Purina Pet Care is one of those. You can be very entertaining around pets, but you can easily much more do things by helping people with their problems with their animals, enhance that relationship, and enable them to do that. Equally, enable them to interact with other parts of society by taking their dogs to hospitals, because animals cheer up sick people. Well known, particularly Labradors. Anyway, a whole other issue. So that's the model that we have been building. Entertain, engage, enhance, and enable. 4 E's. Dead set simple to remember. That's one way to determine a social. I'm sure there are many others. It's purely the one that we have been using and that I've been instrumental in putting into Nestle. It's now been adopted in the Nestle world in many parts because it's a simple thing to remember, it's easy to do, and it's entirely consistent with where Nestle Corporation is going globally with its social practice. I mentioned yesterday in a panel, and John was on as well, the moderator standing here asked me, where do we think our money will be going over time? My answer was, at the moment, it's relatively low across the world. Australia is about 17% of our spend. It's built in 2 years from 7 to 17. My view is that within 5 years, we'll be far more committed to the digital world, less committed to television and magazines. Probably within 5 years to 50% of our money will be there. They're not building a huge 24/7 online facility all day, every day in Switzerland for nothing, because the Nestle is global. The issues that surround us and our opportunities, our global brands, will be on 24 hours. But that's just our model, and they needed to have one too, and it's been adopted by many markets, and certainly the centre is working through that one. The consequence is, for us locally, we've been from a little bit of this with the profile to a whole lot more of that. We well know, and we're working closely with Facebook, that we can build, and ultimately with Google, but certainly with Facebook, we can build a much more robust social identity where we get a whole lot more of approvals than we used to get from society in general by having a much, much stronger social identity.